being here for our Mindful Parenting workshop. I'm looking so forward to our session, and I'm very grateful for your presence and participation. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge with a humble heart and mind that I'm joining you tonight from the traditional and unceded territory of the Kwantlen First Nation and Katzie First Nation, whose lands upon I live, work, and play. Thank you. Now, in the spirit of our Mindful Parenting workshop tonight, I'd also like to take a moment for us to just arrive together. We're all taking time away from our regularly scheduled programming to participate tonight, and as with anything, it's important to be as present as possible about it. So, I invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. I invite you to close your eyes if it feels comfortable for you. You're also welcome to keep them open if that feels better. Start to settle your body into your seat. Press your feet into the floor or whatever surface they're resting on. That might mean a few stretches and wiggles for you. Go ahead and take your time to just settle into the space. As you do this, continue breathing. Deep, slow breaths all the way down into your belly. In and out. Now with each inhale, imagine your breath reaching even further into every finger, every toe, every corner of your mind, body, and soul. Deep breath in, long breath out. In and out. In and out. Now I invite you to call to mind a purpose for joining this session on mindful parenting. What are your hopes for being here? What are your goals? What do you hope to take away? Now, with that purpose and vision in mind, take a few more deep breaths, and with our calm at heart and our purpose in mind, let's begin. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Alison Camire. I am a Moving Forward Family Services intern and have been with the organization since February 2021. I'm a Master's of Education and School Counselling candidate who is almost finished my studies. I've been a teacher for 11 years, and I'm also a teacher trainer for the International Baccalaureate Organization. Most importantly, in the context of this workshop, I am a mom of 2 daughters, ages 2 and 4, and I am on this journey with you. Every day, I am so humbled and challenged by this adventure that is parenting, but I'm also very present for all the joy and growth that it brings. And much of the sharing that I am going to do during this workshop is based on my own parenting and personal growth journey, in addition to my 15 years of experience working with children and families. Most everything in the workshop is research and evidence-based, and I do hope that you're able to gain some new insights and perspectives through the workshop and go away with some practical tools as well to implement in your own parenting adventure. Our session goals are to cover what mindfulness is, talk about what mindful parenting is, the benefits of mindful parenting, how to be responsive rather than reactive and what the difference is. We're going to work on identifying our own stressors, triggers, and hotspots, and we're going to talk about the importance of self-care, self-compassion, and grounding. We're also going to talk about rupture and repair. What happens when it goes wrong? We haven't been the mindful parents that we hope to be. We haven't acted in alignment with our values and intentions. What can we do to repair the relationship and save the moment? Finally, we're going to review an easy to remember mindful parenting protocol, and then I'll resource you with some next steps. So let's begin. When you first think of mindfulness, perhaps an image like this comes to mind: peace, serenity, solitude, no distractions, no concerns, total bliss. Something beautiful and desirable, but not an ongoing or real possibility with the responsibilities and pressures of daily life. Actually, when we talk about mindfulness, we're talking about something more like this. We're talking about calm amongst the chaos, anchoring among the storm. And I want to be clear from the start of our workshop tonight that the concept of mindfulness and the purpose of this workshop is not about drastically changing who you are as a person or a parent, but rather accessing the qualities that you already possess and cultivating coping strategies for when things feel overwhelming. So, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present and aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. Mindfulness is a quality that every human being already possesses. It's not something you have to conjure up, you just have to learn how to access it. And mindfulness can actually be described as a superpower because it can change our minds and change our experiences. Let's watch a video to explore this concept more.
You may have heard this word mindfulness. It's become something of a buzz phrase of late. I'm going to give you one simple, serviceable definition, which is this. Mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? You immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
So with that concept of mindfulness in mind, let's bridge now to mindful parenting and how we can apply this approach of mindfulness to the ways we interact with our children. Mindful parenting means that you bring your conscious attention to what's happening instead of getting hijacked by your emotions. And we all know that parenting can be immensely rewarding and nourishing, but it can also feel really stressful and involve a non-stop stream of changing emotions. Now, of all the variables we face as parents, the ones that we know we have the most influence over is always ourselves. With mindfulness, we can learn to slow down and attend to our children and to ourselves with greater awareness and compassion. And this helps us better manage our responses and fully appreciate the precious moments. Mindful parenting is not about somehow becoming the perfect parent, so to speak, but instead it's about being present in our parenting with all of its imperfections. Mindfulness is about letting go of guilt and shame about the past and focusing on right now. It's about accepting whatever is going on rather than trying to change it or ignore it. Being a mindful parent means that you pay attention to what you're feeling. It doesn't mean that you will never get angry or never get upset. Of course, you will still experience difficult emotions, but acting on them mindlessly is what compromises our parenting. And that's exactly what we're trying to interrupt with the application of mindful parenting. Let's watch a video to reiterate and extend some of these concepts of mindful parenting.
Parenting is a rewarding yet challenging job. As parents, we want to be at our best for our children, but daily demands and stresses sometimes chip away at our parenting skills. Mindfulness can be the key to unlocking our ability to bring out our best parenting. Mindfulness allows us to bring our full attention while listening. It allows us to express non-judgmental acceptance. We become more aware of our emotions and our child's emotions. We better control our reactions in the moment, and we bring more kindness and compassion to each encounter with our child. Research shows mindfulness can be helpful for both parent and child. When we bring mindfulness into parenting, children experience our deep commitment and love. Trust becomes the cornerstone of the relationship, and children tend to have less stress, less acting out, and more independence as they experience us better managing life's ups and downs. Parents benefit from more creative problem solving. We discover that flexibility is crucial as our children grow, and we adapt to their shifting needs. We all know what works with a 5-year-old doesn't always work when they're 15. Mindful parenting. It equips us to bring our best to each moment and encourages our children to grow with confidence and compassion. Welcome to Parenting Mindfully.
So, as you listened to and saw in that video, there's benefits for both parties in the parenting relationship. Benefits for the parent, the caregiver, and benefits for the child as well. So let's review some of the key benefits. You become more aware of your feelings and thoughts as a parent and as an individual. You also become more aware of and responsive to your child's needs, thoughts, and feelings. You become better at regulating your emotions, and over time you become less critical of yourself and your child. You become better at standing back from situations and avoiding impulsive and sudden reactions. Over time, with these practices in place, your relationship with your child will improve. So at this point, you might be thinking, great, sign me up, but how do I do it? So let's dig in. First, I invite you to think about a situation where you got upset or angry at your child. One where you reacted automatically, because that's what most of us do when difficult thoughts, feelings, or judgments arise. In stressful situations, when our emotions are easily triggered, it's hard to be the best version of ourselves. Now, Try your best to bring this situation of anger and upset to mind without shame and judgment. Be kind to yourself and hold this memory with as much curiosity and compassion as you can manage. We are always doing our best, but sometimes things go wrong. Now ask yourself, how could I do things differently next time? Remember that mindful parenting is not about somehow becoming the perfect parent, but rather being present in our parenting with all of its imperfections. Mindful parenting doesn't mean that you will never get upset and angry, but that you'll act on your emotions mindfully and with control. The goal is really to learn how to respond rather than react. You may not have control over the circumstances, but you always have control over your response. And Viktor E. Frankl explains that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. The most challenging but important part of mindfulness, and in particular mindful parenting, is being able to find that calm space in the heat of the moment. Now we can practice finding this space by focusing our attention on our body and breath, because emotions show themselves as changes in body or breath. When we're able to slow down and focus on our body and breath, there is a physiological change that decreases our reflexive responses and increases the abilities of our prefrontal cortex. All of this leads to a calmer mind, where you can find the space to sit with the emotion. When we're able to pause, we can experience the emotions as sensations in our body without fueling them by focusing on the trigger. In that space, we can remind ourselves to breathe and bring our thoughts back to the present moment, and then choose to respond how we want to and not react because we are out of control. Dr. Mark Brackett, who's the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, calls this pause for reflection a meta moment. And he recommends asking yourself a couple of questions in that pause and in that space. He recommends asking, how have I handled situations like this in the past? Or what would my best self do right now? Visualizing our best self redirects our attention away from the trigger and toward our values. This supports us to choose a helpful regulation strategy and response. So, most importantly, pause. Give yourself that space to choose. Focus on your body and your breath. Sit with the emotion that you're experiencing. Name it and be specific. Make the connection between mind and body. Where do you feel that emotion? Are you experiencing it as tightness of throat? Nausea in the belly? What is your body feeling right now? As you bring yourself back into the present moment by naming your emotion and making a bodily connection, now imagine responding as your best self. What would you say or do right now that is in best alignment with your values? When we learn how to pause and connect honestly with our inner experience, we are then able to respond to others from our full intelligence and heart. A simple way to remember this is notice, label, accept, breathe. This can be something that you have written on a Post-it note in key areas around the house to support you in building habits around mindful and responsive parenting. Let's watch a video to explain.
One way for parents to bring more joy and peace into your parenting is to practice mindful parenting, or to bring a little bit of mindfulness into the ways that you interact with your kids. So mindfulness is just attentive awareness of what you might be feeling in your emotions or in your body, or even just what might be going on that you're not judgmental about, that you kind of accept it. So for parenting, it's great because it gives you time to pause and plan before you actually respond to a stimulus. So kids might do something really frustrating to you. You have a minute to take a breath, and then you can react to it in hopefully a different way than you might have if you hadn't had that moment of mindful awareness. So a lot of this is just getting in the habit of mindfulness, and I use just simple little sticky notes to remind me to practice being more mindful. I write on that sticky note: notice, label, accept, breathe. So for a while there, I had one of these sticky notes in the kitchen on the clock because I noticed that right before I would start to feel anxious that we were running out of time in the mornings, I needed a moment of mindfulness. So I put this little sticky note there. I would look at the clock to see if we were running late, and I'd think, okay, I'm going to take this mindful moment to notice that I'm starting to feel hurried. It's making me feel a little tense in my body, but I accept that this is the way the morning is going, and I'm just going to take a deep breath right now, and then I can move on with our day.
So, sounds easy enough, right? But in the busyness of every day, it's not always so. And certainly, mindful parenting takes practice. The good news is that there are things we can actively do on a regular basis to position ourselves to respond rather than react. This includes two main things. The first is building self-awareness, and the second is filling your cup or taking care of your own personal needs and wellness. So cultivating awareness means knowing your stressors, knowing your triggers, knowing your hot spots. Because if you don't know what's happening for you, you can't be expected to regulate yourself. Filling your cup means taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. This includes self-care, self-compassion, and grounding exercises. Let's talk first about cultivating personal awareness. Stress is the number one thing that gets in the way of being peaceful, present, and the best version of ourselves, and we all experience it. Stress is a feeling of being tense, overwhelmed, worn out, or exhausted. A small amount of stress can be motivating, but too much stress makes even small tasks seem daunting. Sometimes stress is the accumulation of many small hassles, while other times it's the result of major life changes or long-term problems. Unfortunately, when you're stressed out, exhausted, and overwhelmed, you can't be available and responsive to your child to the best of your abilities. Now, there's many factors that contribute to stress, and they're different for everyone, but some common ones are listed here. So what happens when we are stressed? Our bodies and our brains are wired to react to high stress situations as a safety net. If our brain perceives a threat, it signals the amygdala, which is the body's alarm system, and this tells our body to act without thinking. The amygdala responds to situations with the fight, flight, or freeze response. Now this is to protect us. It has a function. But our stress receptors can't distinguish between real dangers and false dangers. And in everyday parenting, our stress response often gets triggered unnecessarily by events that are not actually life-threatening. For example, our bodies react to our kids spilling cereal and milk all over the floor in the same way we would react if we were being chased by a bear. And depending on your childhood experiences and memories, your stress response may be triggered more easily than another person. When our stress receptors are triggered, we have difficulty thinking clearly and being attentive to people around us. We are unable to be thoughtful in our responses and have trouble staying focused. Our ability to solve problems is diminished. Dr. Dan Siegel, a clinical psychologist who studies the brain, explains that during stressful parenting moments, we may lose control or flip our lid, so to speak, and we let our emotions control our reactions. When we fly off the handle, it happens so quickly that we aren't thinking about how our children are perceiving us. Our reactions can be really scary to kids sometimes. Also, we need to remember that we're modeling that this is how grown-ups react to stress. So if we can choose to be more mindful by pausing before responding, we can teach kids too that they can pause and choose to respond instead of react. Perhaps this is all sounding pretty familiar to you. So let's take some time to explore our personal stressors. Understanding our personal stressors matters because if we are aware of the factors in our lives that are contributing to stress, then we're more likely to manage them and less likely to react to them without awareness and control. The factors that contribute to stress can be divided into 3 categories. First, there's the daily hassles. These are the common annoyances or strains of daily life. For example, traffic, chores, work problems, lack of sleep, homework, limited free time, or perhaps an argument with a coworker or family member. The second are major life changes. These are important events. They can be positive or negative, but the point is that they require significant adjustment. So for example, the birth of a child, separation or divorce, a new job, the death of a loved one, moving, or major illness or injury. The third set of factors that contribute to stress are life circumstances. These are permanent or long-term circumstances that make life more difficult. So examples of life circumstances are poverty or financial problems, a disability or chronic illness, conflictual relationships, values that conflict with the dominant culture, discrimination, job satisfaction, or living somewhere unsafe. So let's just take a few moments to consider for ourselves what our personal stressors might be under each category. And if you have a paper and pen handy, I invite you to actually write them down. Remember that if we understand and can anticipate our circumstances, then we're more likely to respond effectively rather than react. So take a moment to consider maybe 1 or 2 stressors that apply to you in each category. Okay, let's talk now about identifying our triggers. We heard that word before in our conversation about what happens to our body under stress. Now, knowing your specific triggers is another significant component of the awareness piece in mindful parenting, building our capacity to respond rather than react. Emotional triggers are feelings or judgments from your own childhood usually, which may arise when your child does a specific action. So for example, your child might act in a way that clashes with your beliefs. An example of this is your kid throwing food in a restaurant or grabbing all the toys in a store, and this might make you feel embarrassed or shameful. Your child might also behave in a way that evokes a childhood memory and response for you. An example of this is your child not being on the academic level you think they should be, and you feeling like somehow you failed as a parent because when you got a bad grade as a child, your parent said it wasn't good enough. Another example is your child's behavior evoking a traumatic state or event. So for example, if you broke your arm climbing a jungle gym as a child, you might be scared every time your child starts climbing at the playground. Another example is when your child's behavior activates the lens of fears and desires. So this might be if one of your children wakes up the other child during the night. You're thinking no one's sleeping, everyone's crying, and start to fear that you have no adult time and you've completely lost the old you now that you're a parent. And parenting is so hard for us because our children are a mirror. Our children reflect back to us all the things we haven't resolved yet within ourselves. This is why it's so important to learn to recognize and anticipate What types of situations are likely to trigger emotional responses in you? So we're not reacting based on our emotions and histories. We are responding to the present moment and the child that is in front of us. Now, I invite you to think again about that recent situation where you got upset or angry at your child. What feelings were triggered? Were you angry? Were you ashamed? Were you embarrassed? Next time, try to experience your emotion or emotions or triggers as a wave, coming and going, coming and going. Try your best not to block or stop the emotion. Don't push it away. Don't judge or reject it. Don't try to keep the emotion around either. Don't cling to it. Don't make it bigger than it already is. Remember that you are not your emotion, and you don't have to act on your emotion. Just be there, fully mindful of it, fully present. Remind yourself that you don't need to blame yourself or your child for what happened. Next, try to see the conflict through your child's eyes. If you can't see the goodness of your child in that moment during the tantrum or the argument, whatever's happening, try to bring yourself to a time when you did feel connected with your child, a time when you were able to respond with kindness. And try to remember that version of your child and that version of yourself when you're triggered. And this is all the things we can do in that pause we talked about before. That's why the pause is so critical in our ability to respond rather than react. Now let's talk about our hot spots. Remember, there were 3 components of personal awareness when it comes to mindful parenting. The first we talked about were stressors. The second we talked about were triggers. And what we're going to talk about right now are hot spots, certain times in our days when we're more vulnerable and less emotionally available. We might be feeling stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or helpless, or we may feel preoccupied by something else. Now, I know for me that a key hotspot is trying to get everybody out of the house in the morning. For other parents, it might be shifting from work to home. Have a think about your regular routine. What does a day usually look like for you? What does a week usually look like for you? What are the times and transitions where emotions typically are heightened, when stress generally feels high? Checking in with ourselves at these times of day is essential to manage our responses. So let's take the example of transitioning from work to home. A mindful check-in that you may want to do for yourself looks something like this. You're leaving work, you're headed home. Maybe you're on transit, maybe you're in your car. Take a moment to check in with yourself and reflect on your day. Were there any hard parts of your day? If so, pause for a minute to acknowledge them. Were there any lessons to be learned? Now breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, let the hard situations fade or float away. Just let them go. Imagine them on clouds, softening and then floating away out of your mind. If you're having a very hard time letting them go, please check in with someone else. You might continue by taking 3 slow, deep breaths and visualizing or writing down at least 3 things that went well today, practicing some gratitude. Lastly, shift your attention to think about what you're going to do after work. What do you need to do? How will you take care of yourself and others today? This check-in is an important piece of not getting carried away with our emotions. This is another version of the pause before things are getting out of control. If we're able to check in with ourselves and be aware of our experiences and our emotions, we are better able to be responsive rather than reactive. So there we are. Within this goal of positioning ourselves as responsive rather than reactive, The first step is personal awareness. This includes knowing and owning your stressors, your triggers, and your hotspots, which we've just covered. The next important step is making sure your cup is full enough, so to speak, so that you can take effective care of others. This includes self-care, self-compassion, and grounding. Let's start ourselves off with this conversation with a quote from Kristen Mariella, who's a parent educator. She says that the moment we realize how we react to our kids' behavior has more to do with how we're feeling than what our kids are doing is the moment we understand that our main job as parents must be to keep ourselves emotionally healthy. So let's talk first about self-care. And this is a term that undoubtedly you've heard before. And I'm not sure what your relationship is with self-care and what your practices look like. But self-care basically means caring for ourselves so that we can care for others. Caring for yourself and making sure you're taking time to do the things you enjoy. And it's important to make self-care a priority. Try your best to give it the same importance as other responsibilities. Sometimes the things that we plan to do for ourselves are the first things we take off the to-do list when things get busy. To make it manageable and achievable, you might want to set specific self-care goals. For example, I'll walk for 30 minutes 3 times a week during my lunchtime. Make self-care a habit as well. Choose things that you can do often and things that you'll stick with. Make your self-care goals possible. Set boundaries to protect your self-care. Remember that your needs are as important as anyone else's, and that a few minutes of self-care is better than no self-care at all. Try to think now just for a moment, what does self-care mean to you, and what does it look like? Are you able to take care of yourself? Do you understand that your needs are important as anyone else's? And how do you take action on this in your own life? A wonderful thing about the way we're now conceptualizing self-care is that it's more expansive and inclusive than it used to be, the cliche bubble baths and massages. And I find that it's really useful to think of self-care in broader terms, because not only is it more realistic, but it's also more holistic and responsive to our whole selves and beings. And this self-care wheel represents some different categories of self-care. This may not be all-inclusive, but it's an example of some different categories that we can think about as we tend to ourselves in order for us to be our most fulfilled and functional selves. So we've got categories like gratitude and mindfulness, environment, setting limits, asking for help, family and trusted others, connections that we have, our values and our value system, our interests, hobbies, and playfulness, exercise, sleep and diet, and social community. And I want to take a moment to really zero in on one of those categories, which was setting limits. Yes, this means even with our kids. It's important to understand that all the reluctant yeses that we do during the day, for example, playing with our kids when we don't actually want to, taking them with us into the bathroom with us, driving them somewhere we don't want to go, all of these reluctant yeses eventually accumulate into negative thoughts and resentful feelings towards our kids, which ultimately undermines the parent-child relationship. And to be able to truly enjoy parenting and truly enjoy our children, respect needs to go both ways. We know that our kids will probably never choose to give us the break we need. So we need to know that we are the ones responsible for keeping the dynamic in the relationship healthy. Setting personal boundaries with young children might sound like, I don't want you to climb on my back, but do you want to sit on my lap instead? I'll get you a glass of juice as soon as I finish my toast. This is the last time we'll be listening to this song for now. We can listen to it again another time. I'm not in the mood to play chase right now, but I'd love to sit with you and watch you play in your room. So that's self-care. Easy, right? Let's talk now about self-compassion. Self-compassion means giving yourself the same kindness and care you would give to a good friend. So instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing yourself for various inadequacies or shortcomings, self-compassion means that you are kind and understanding when confronted with personal failings. After all, nobody said you were supposed to be perfect. Now, you may still try to change in ways that allow you to be a more healthy and happy person, but this is done because you care about yourself, not because you think that you are worthless or unacceptable as you currently are. Perhaps most importantly, having compassion for yourself means that you honor and accept your humanness. Things will not always go the way you want them to. You will encounter frustrations, you will encounter losses, you will make mistakes, bump up against your limitations, you may fall short of your ideals. This is the human condition, and it's a reality shared by all of us. And the more you can open your heart to this reality, instead of constantly resisting and fighting against it, the more you will be able to feel compassion for yourself and all of your fellow humans in the experience of life. Now, Kristen Neff is a pioneering self-compassion researcher, author, and teacher, and I highly recommend visiting her website, www.self-compassion.org. And on the website, you can find a lot of self-compassion exercises and tips for practice, including guided meditations. Now, let's listen to Kristen speak briefly on some of the practices.
First thing is just to give yourself permission to treat yourself kindly. A lot of people think that it's selfish or that it involves self-pity. It's really not. Remember, self-compassion recognizes the shared human condition. It's not, woe is me, poor me. It's, well, life is difficult for everyone. So, and again, because it helps you give more to others, it's not selfish. So giving yourself permission to be kind, knowing that it's going to help you be happy, it's going to help others be happy. Then concrete things like noticing how you speak to yourself, asking, would I say this to a close friend? Usually not. What would I say to a close friend? Can I try treating myself that way? You can do this in letter writing. It's very effective. If you're really struggling, write yourself a letter in the same way that you would, again, what you would express to a good friend in the same situation, but write that to yourself. And then you can go back and read it. That's helpful. Probably one of the most helpful things, though, because we're mammals, we are programmed evolutionarily to respond to warmth, physical warmth, soothing touch, and gentle vocalizations. As mammals, when we, just like think of a mommy lion and her cub, we're programmed for our bodies to calm down and to feel safe and to feel soothed. So one of the most effective ways to give yourself compassion is through some physical gesture, because you're actually tapping into that mammalian caregiving system at a physiological level. So finding some touch that feels comfortable. A really common one might be to put both hands over your heart, or maybe on your belly, or cradle your cheeks, or do something like this. Some people just holding their hand. That can let your body know that you care, and then sometimes it's easier for your mind to follow after your body has calmed down a little bit.
So finally, in this work of filling your own cup, I recommend grounding exercises, and these are techniques that you can implement throughout the day to stay regulated. And grounding exercises are also ways for you to firmly anchor yourself in a present moment and increase feelings of peace and calm when you notice your energy starting to increase a little bit and that dysregulation starting to begin. So there's a million ways you can ground yourself, and you only need to do a quick Google search to discover more, but I want to share a few of my favorites now. The first is a simple 3 deep belly breaths, which is sort of like how we started off our session tonight. I like to actually put my hands on my belly. This is something that I can do if I'm driving, walking, standing, sitting. Put your hands on your belly and breathe in, and feel your hands rise as you inhale and the air fills your belly. And feel your hands sink as you exhale and the air leaves your belly and your body. Breathing deep into our belly is much more regulating for us than taking short breaths that end in our chest. You can also practice pressing your fingers into your thumbs. So one finger at a time, your index finger, middle finger, ring finger, pinky finger, ring finger, middle finger, index finger. Just pressing into your thumb as quickly or as slowly as you like, with as much pressure as feels good for you. This can get you into a little rhythm that's really regulating for your body and your mind. Pushing your feet into the floor, or whatever surface you're on, is another really grounding exercise that you can do for yourself at any point during the day. So just visualize your whole foot meeting the floor, spreading your toes apart as far as you can, really connecting every little centimeter of your foot to the space beneath you that anchors you to the earth. Trace the outline is another good one to calm yourself when you're noticing that you are about to react rather than respond. When you are about to shout at your child or say something that you might regret, in that pause for a moment as you're reflecting on your emotions and your experiences, look across the room. Find something, a lamp, a table, trace the outline of that object. Just visually with your eyes, go around. Notice the shape, notice the angles, notice the lines. Bring yourself back into the present room and environment so that you can detach yourself from your triggers. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique is one that you've also probably heard of. That's noticing looking around the room or the outdoor space wherever you are, noticing 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can touch, and 1 thing that you can taste. Just add water is another great grounding technique. This might be as simple as filling a glass of water for yourself and drinking it all before you respond. This might mean going to the sink and running your hands underwater. Feeling the water glide over your hands. Is it warm? Is it cool? Let it reach your wrists as well. Just letting that water bring your energy back down again. This is one that you can share with your kids as well. Any of these are. When kids are getting excitable, emotions are high, energy is flying through the roof, just pause for a drink of water. Put the child in the bath. Try washing hands together, feeling the soap glide over your skin. So there we are. Now just to review, our goal in practicing mindful parenting is to respond rather than react. And we can position ourselves to be more likely to respond rather than react by cultivating awareness of our stressors, triggers, and hotspots, and by making sure that we're tending to our own personal wellness through self-care, self-compassion, and grounding exercises throughout the day. Now, you and I are not going to get this right 100% of the time. There will still be moments when we lose our cool or flip our lids. But the good news is that this is okay, and that there's such a thing as being a good enough parent. It was British pediatrician and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott who first coined the phrase, good enough mother. He came to realize that babies and children actually benefit when their caregivers fail them in manageable ways. However, to be good enough, one must know how and when to step in and repair the rupture in the attachment bond. And the sooner the better, or else the child could end up feeling distressed and unsafe. Neurobiology and development expert Dr. Dan Siegel explains that ruptures are inevitable breaks in the nurturing connection with the child. What's important, though, is not that ruptures never occur, but that ruptures are repaired. Psychologist and parenting expert Dr. Becky Kennedy coaches parents on exactly how to approach the repair situation when you've just emotionally lost it on your child. She says that we first need to repair with ourselves and then repair with our child. This sounds like saying to yourself, I'm a good parent who is having a hard time. I didn't mess up my kids forever. I can repair. Now, go find your child and say, I'm sorry. I'm sure that felt very scary for you. I'm working on staying calm when I have big feelings. I love you very much. Remember, good parents don't get it right all the time. Good parents repair. I promised you a summary at the very end. If all the other information has gone in one ear and out the other tonight, that's okay. We all have a lot on our minds. But here's your mindful parenting protocol. Things that you need to remember in order to respond rather than react and ensure that you are not being hijacked by your emotions. The first is to be self-aware. Notice your feelings when you're in conflict with your child. Name them and be specific about them. The second is learn to pause. Pausing is the key to creating that space to respond as our best selves. Pause before responding in anger or frustration. Finally, listen carefully to a child's viewpoint, even when you may disagree with it. There's always time for kindness when it comes to your children. Remember that we can notice, label, accept, and breathe. And that can be like a little cheat sheet on Post-its around our house to help us build up these habits of mindful parenting. If you're interested in learning more about mindful and responsive parenting, I've put some resources for you here. There's a few books: The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shefali Tsabari, Mindful Parenting by Dr. Kristen, Raising Good Humans by Hunter Clark Fields, and Everyday Blessings by Mila and John Kabat-Zinn. A few podcasts that I would recommend are, the first one is Janet Lansbury's Unruffled, Maggie Dent's Parental as Anything, and Good Inside with Dr. Becky Kennedy. A few people that you can follow on social media are Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, Dr. Becky at Good Inside, Big Life Journal, and The Mom Psychologist. Now, your own mindfulness practice is not essential to mindful parenting, but if you do wish to cultivate your own mindfulness practice in order to better position yourself to respond rather than react, here's some recommendations of how you can get started. Tara Brock is a meditation teacher that has a lot of guided meditations available online and a lot of talks as well. You can look at calm.com. There's a website and an app for that. Mindful.org. Headspace, which has an app as well. UCLA Mindful, which is a free app, completely free, no in-app purchases or anything. There's a lot of guided meditations in there. And I mentioned selfcompassion.org before, which is Kristen Neff's website and has a big long list of guided meditations that you can listen to. I also want to mention the counseling services that are available through Moving Forward Family Services. Counseling and therapy is a great way to tend to your personal wellness. There's individual counseling available, couples and family counseling. There's group programs available for both men and women, and there's cognitive behavioral therapy and healthy relationships coaching programs available that run for 12 weeks and 8 weeks respectively. There's mindfulness-based somatic therapy, art therapy, and sand play therapy as available as specific modalities and approaches. There's also general sessions where counseling interns or registered clinical counselors will use an eclectic approach with you. All you need to do is go to Moving Forward Family Services website, mffs.ca, and you can click on the Request Counseling tab to fill in a self-referral form. Now, before we part ways, I want to leave you tonight with a couple of quotes. The first is from John Kabat-Zinn. He says, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." Also from the iconic Mr. Rogers, "If the day ever came when we were able to accept ourselves and our children exactly as we are and they are, then I believe we would have come to an understanding of what good parenting means." Remember, with mindfulness, we are not aiming to get rid of difficult and complicated experiences, thoughts, and emotions. Instead, we welcome them. with awareness, and with acceptance. Also remember that you are the best parent for your child. It's been designed this way for a reason, so give yourself a little bit of credit. Finally, thank you for being here for the workshop, and thank yourselves as well for showing up, being present, and doing your best. Thank you.